Good evening, this is Roy Diaz in for Point 6 News. Our first story has to do with a little bit of conflict going on within the halls of Congress.
Do you know what we're here for? You know we're here about AG.
I don't
Garland.
think you know what you're here for.
Well, you the one talking about. I guess
I
you
think
still
your
stuck in the
fake
courtroom.
eyelashes are messing up.
No,
what you're
ain't
reading.
nothing.
Hold on.
Listen,
Order.
Mr. Chairman,
That's beneath
would
even
you
you,
please
Mr. Green.
regain
That's beneath
order
even
of your
you.
committee?
Order.
I do have a point of order, and I would like to move to take down Ms. Green's words. That is absolutely unacceptable. How dare you attack
Meeting will
the
suspend.
physical
Meeting will
appearance of another
suspend.
person?
Are your
Move
feelings hurt?
her words down.
Aw.
Oh, girl, baby girl.
Oh, really?
Don't even play. with
Baby
me.
girl?
I
I don't
We
think
are going to
so.
move, and we're going to take your words down.
I
Thank you very
second
much.
that motion.
So, you agree to strike your words?
Yeah. I'll
Okay.
agree.
Ms. Green agrees to strike her words.
I believe she
Chair
needs to
recognizes
apologize.
Mr.
No. She
Perry.
needs to
Okay,
apologize.
hold on. Then after Mr. Perry's going to be recognized, then Ms. Green
I'm not
has 4 minutes and
apologizing.
21
Well,
seconds.
then
Okay,
you're
reserve
not
the right to
striking your
object.
words.
I am
Mr.
not
Perry.
apologizing.
Now let's go. Come on, guys.
it's me.
Ms. Crockett.
I'm just curious, just to better understand your ruling. If someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad built butch body, that would not be engaging in personalities, correct?
A what now?
Chairman, I make a motion to strike those.
Now moving on to Ukraine. For a while, the U.S. has been providing long-range weapons to Ukraine under the conditions that they would not use the ammunition received from the U.S. to strike Russian territory. This is after the month of May, where Russia has dropped more than 3,200 guided aerial bombs on Ukraine. The French president and German chancellor, including other NATO nations, have been in support of allowing Ukraine to use weapons to better defend themselves, only recently changing the rules and conditions on the provided weapons, now allowing Ukraine to use the weapons to shoot only known Russian bases that have been used to target Ukraine and that are close to the border. And for our next story, an individual known as David McBride enlisted as a military lawyer for the Australian Special Forces during the American-Afghan War, where more military, including the Australian Army, got involved. His job was to make sure soldiers were following the rule of law. But as the war went on, David became disillusioned with the war and the actions being done. Many of the files would describe some of the actions that being done by soldiers. He would copy those and keep those files. Some of the files on hand would be those of Australia's most decorated soldiers, one being Ben Robert Smith. While deployed in Afghanistan, some of the papers would include his shooting of innocent civilians. The events were continuously covered up by the Defense Force, once changing the story of when Ben had shot a small shepherd boy. Then some villagers came out, and those two were shot. No one had weapons, and Ben received a medal for their actions, as in the story they were described as a Taliban militia, which was attempting to flank them. All this was done to continue the image of a justified war, so David would continue copying and holding on to these files, one day showing them to the press, this making him a wanted fugitive fleeing to Spain. On May 14, 2024, David was sentenced guilty for 5 years and 8 months, with parole after 2 years and 3 months. Really comforting to know that individuals who commit war crimes are allowed to roam free because the war needs to be justified, while genuine heroes get locked up for speaking about the horrors that go on during war. And as an added punch to the gut, David knew that if he were to step back in Australia, he would get caught. Of course, David is a father, and not wanting to miss a father-daughter dance, he returned to where he would then be caught within the Sydney airport.
I'm dancing with a couple of my friends in the crowd, and he comes up behind me, and I just turn around, and I was in shock. I put my hands over my mouth, and we hug, and it was one of the best nights ever, actually. It was really, really nice.
When talking about Ukraine and how the U.S. should do more to support them, some might also think about the parallels to Israel. On October 7th, Israel had been brutally attacked from Hamas terrorists, and how the U.S. should continue to support Israel and they're justified to strike back at Hamas. Similar to why Russia began to invade Ukraine, because of Nazi parties in the Ukraine government, when in reality it was just about expanding their land. For those past 8 months, Joe Biden has continued to support Israel through all the bombings of innocent civilians. Any videos and photos would be too graphic for me to show, and keeping in mind that half of the population within Gaza is just teens or children, a lot of the media coming out of Gaza is violence that has been inflicted to children. Many of the most recent videos are bombs being dropped on Rafah, a place that at the beginning of the war was designated as a safe zone for those fleeing away from the conflict, and too many of those videos show death, whether it be the uncovering of mass graves, people running away from bombs, those who weren't able to run away, what remains of those bodies. And one of the videos that stuck with me the most was of a baby being lifted up after the explosion in a refuge, with its head missing. What Israel has been doing for months has quit being self-defense, but instead of genocide, on people like you or I, who are just wanting to make it to the next day. And even if it takes time, the march for progress doesn't stop.
Israel has offered a comprehensive new proposal. It's a roadmap to an enduring ceasefire and the release of all hostages. This proposal has been transmitted by Qatar to Hamas. Today, I want to lay out its terms for the American citizens and for the world. This new proposal has 3 phases. The first phase would last for 6 weeks. Here's what it would include: a full and complete ceasefire, a withdrawal of Israeli forces from all populated areas of Gaza, release of a number of hostages, including women, the elderly, the wounded, in exchange for release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. There are American hostages who would be released at this stage, and we want them home. Additional, some remains of hostages who have been killed would be returned to their families, bringing some degree of closure to that terrible grief. Palestinians, civilians would return to their homes and neighborhoods in all areas of Gaza, including in the north. Humanitarian assistance would surge, with 600 trucks carrying aid into Gaza every single day. With the ceasefire, that aid could be safely and effectively distributed to all who need it. Hundreds of thousands of temporary shelters, including housing units, would be delivered by the international community. All that and more would begin immediately.
Whether it be from enough protests or a politician finally growing a backbone, enough is enough, and for the talks for a ceasefire finally in play. And for some more positive news,
Count 1 is guilty, 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 guilty. Another felony charge. Guilty, 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 guilty. Count 34. Guilty.
our last 2 positive stories are wife murderer O.J. Simpson is finally dead, and org attacks on yachts have been increasing.